Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of the Quality Talks podcast. This is an unplugged version. So you've seen us with the bite size, sort of the shorter editions of the podcast. Well, this is the unplugged version, which is the longer edition. So we've got the two different versions out there now. And we hope that sort of the difference and variance in content is going to really sort of appeal to different people at different times. So whether you're on a shorter drive, shorter run, or anything like that, you can listen to the bite-sized episodes, or on those longer walks, longer drives, or just sitting at home having a cup of tea in the morning. You can obviously jump into the longer unplugged episodes. So I hope everybody's doing okay. We've got a really exciting episode lined up today. We're going to be talking all around accessibility and accessibility testing, and I've got a special guest joining us to share her experience around that topic as well. So I'll bring her on in a second. But yeah, I hope everybody's been doing well. I mean, I think that the weather's kind of good and bad right now. A little bit warm, I have to say. It's a little bit warm in this studio right now, but we've got the fan going, and yeah, it's just about manageable. And we're also recording in the morning, which we don't normally do, so that's thankful. Chris is still playing golf, people. So please have a word with him if you see him, because yeah, he really needs to get his ass back onto the podcast, doesn't he? So without further ado, I'm not going to waste any more time because this topic is massive, right? I've got a lot of love for accessibility, and unfortunately it doesn't get as much love as it probably should do, and as much airtime. So this is why I'm really keen to cover this today and do it in a full length unplugged episode. So I'm going to bring on our special guest. Our special guest is Ayesha Saeed, and I'll bring her on now. Ayesha,
Hello.
how you doing?
Hi, I'm good, thanks. Excited today. And yeah, it's nice morning to be doing this on, so it's not super hot. So yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it worked out well in the end, I think. Definitely worked out well.
Yes.
How's things in general? I think we were chatting beforehand. It's been quite a busy week for many reasons, because we were at the Ministry of Testing meet up on Thursday, weren't we?
Yeah, it was a really big one, and yeah, big shout out to Gary and the MOT team for putting together something amazing again. But yeah, there was loads of people, some great talks. You had your fantastic talk as well, keeping
Thank
everyone
you.
awake. But yeah, it was a really good one. But yeah, been a busy week. I think we're both here ready for the weekend, aren't we? From what we were saying earlier.
Definitely need that time to recharge. I think it's like when the energy's going throughout the week with different events and all this sort of stuff, and you kind of get to the weekend and all of a sudden you kind of think, I'm a little bit tired. I'm a little bit tired, but we've got the energy for this recording today. So thank you for joining. I'm really excited to have you on and really delve into accessibility and the art of, the testing side of it, but more generally, like accessibility as a whole, because we spoke around that when we were originally sort of planning this episode. But before we do, I'm keen for you to introduce yourself to the viewers and the listeners.
Oh, yeah, I know. Really excited to be on, Stu. And yeah, accessibility is such a big topic, so it's hard to refine it, but I'll do my best and hopefully people enjoy it. So yeah, I'm Aisha. I started as a QA engineer about 6 years or so ago now, and I was introduced to accessibility in those early stages. So I was first introduced to like audits and testing and assistive technology, and I really liked it, and I think it really resonates with like my values as a person, because like I really value like inclusivity and better understanding of people. I sort of studied social anthropology at university, so like I'm really interested in
Wow.
people as well. So
Yeah.
it kind of tied together a lot of things that I enjoyed. So I started learning about it, starting to do my own learning around it. And it was still primarily like smaller projects that I was doing at the company I was at the time. But it helped me get like a good foundation to like understanding what it was about. And then from there, I just like continued to grow in it. So I was on some public sector projects. So that allowed me to get like a really good foundation of the basics, because like a lot of the accessibility is really good in those spaces, because they've got like the GDS design system and the service standard, which kind of outlines quite clearly like what you need to do for people who have accessibility needs. And then I took a bit of a step away from Gov for a bit and moved into the private sector, and I started working on some apps. So they were like casino gaming apps, also in accessibility though, but that was fascinating because it was just like completely different to what I knew around the web. Some things were obviously very similar, but there were different behaviors I had to learn about, different
Yeah.
standards and guidelines like the iOS and Android and all the different things there, which helped me gain like a different perspective on it all.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it was really fantastic to, learn about that. And then I moved back into Gov again. So I'm currently work at a company called Saliris Reply, and they do a lot of work in the public sector. They've got people from people in development, architecture, business analysis, design, and QA, and accessibility is a growing practice there as well now. So now I lead the efforts at one of our major public sector clients, which is the Courts and Tribunal Services.
Yeah.
And I'm an accessibility test lead there now. So I really, really enjoy it. I've got a fabulous team and they're all so great. And, it makes the job a lot easier. And everyone I work with is honestly really on board with it once they start hearing about, the reasons behind why accessibility matters.
Yeah.
And, how it doesn't have to be like a really hard thing to embed from the start, and you don't have to do it all at once as well. So yeah, a big part of my role now is not just doing like audits and testing, but it's kind of like around building this strategy around why accessibility matters, and also how to kind of get teams to do more accessibility testing in like a manageable way, and kind of changing the culture around it. So it's a really big task, and it's not like a short-term thing. But it's been really good so far. And like I said, there's some really good people who really do understand it that I work with. So that makes it easier.
That's really cool. And the fact that you're actually an accessibility lead, I've never sort of known anybody to actually have that sort of responsibility as as a role. It's always sort of bolted onto other roles, if that makes sense. How did that
Yeah.
kind of come about in terms of that actually becoming a sort of a lead role in itself? Because obviously it is such a big thing. Like you say, a lot of that is then coaching and training people around accessibility and building that cultural side. So how did that kind of come about?
Yeah, so the accessibility, where I sit as a lead, it sits within a wider centre of excellence. So Gareth Davis, who is the head of test at HMCTS,
Yeah.
he sort of put this proposal forward to build like a testing centre of excellence at HMCTS, and he wanted like the different areas because he saw like, this could be really beneficial for HMCTS to kind of standardise the way testing was done. So accessibility was a key pillar to that, and that's because like he saw the priority there. Gareth's great as well. Big shout out to Gareth.
Shout out to Gareth.
Yeah,
I don't know Gareth,
shout out
but
to Gareth.
shout out to Gareth anyway.
So yeah, accessibility testing is one strand. We've also got performance testing, automation, and test
Right.
management as
Okay.
well.
Yeah.
So accessibility testing is one part of that, and it's just a massive space. So like we sit in a testing center of excellence, but because the accessibility work goes far beyond just testing, and often if you're only looking at it in testing, it's too late. We
Yeah.
do a lot of work much like, earlier than that. Like we work with different departments, we work with design, we work with like project managers and delivery managers and so on to try and like build it in right from the start. So like if we can get in right when the project's beginning, that's fantastic because we can really work with the teams like and kind of build it in from the beginning.
Yeah.
But often that doesn't always happen. Sometimes these services have been running for a while and that can be harder. But, teams are often very receptive to it when, we first start talking about it and they're like, oh, okay, that's really important. And we see like how hard it is for someone to navigate a site if they can't use a keyboard or something. So it's kind of building up that empathy with them that really helps kind of get the message across. But yeah, that's kind of how the role came about. And I've been doing this role for a few years now, and I really love it. I really do. Like the day-to-day is so different. Sometimes I could be working with a team on like a specific Jira ticket they're retesting, for example, and I'll be giving them a specific fix or solution or way to test it. And then I could be in the next hour just looking at something very high level. I could be looking at like a dashboard with all the services and I'm trying to like build a story around that, and like it's like zooming in and zooming out. Like I'm getting whiplash a lot, to be honest, but it's good. It's good because you kind of have to understand both what's going on in the
Yeah.
specifics to understand how you can like build a strategy around that that actually works for people.
Yeah.
Um, because you can't kind of go in like and say this is how it is. Like we need to understand how teams work. So it doesn't feel like that add-on, it doesn't feel like that extra piece of work. Like it can be part of everything they do if they understand it, and it's also incremental. So that's kind of the approach I like to take.
Nice. Yeah. I mean that's a great sort of approach in the sense of having that center of excellence and having those specialists or specialisms within that to then drive and um, shift that mindset and behavior specifically within those areas, because you can dedicate the time then, can't you? Whereas if you're trying to be, even if you've got a center of excellence, but your roles are more generalist, it's very hard to give the time into that sort of particular area. So that's a really great way of approaching it. Um, are you so in your role then? Do you have a team of sort of accessibility specialists, or are you leading through others into the team, into the wider teams?
Yeah, so we do have a small team. So yeah, there's myself, there's one of our accessibility specialists,
Hmm.
Gillian, and then there's also Aaron who supports us in the accessibility space. So we are quite small
Yeah.
in terms of like the scope of work we have to look after, but we do
Mm.
everything from like doing training with teams to um, like doing audits or helping them with testing or
Yeah.
helping them to understand like easy checks they can do. So it's not like super overwhelming for them. We also do like wireframe reviews with teams so we can kind of keep pushing that shift left sort of accessibility testing approach.
Hmm.
So yeah, we do a lot of stuff, and then we also try and do things in terms of the center of excellence, which is about like standardizing and
Yes.
putting out guidelines, templates, and everything. But like we often like just spend a lot of our time supporting teams because they need that, and that's often where you can have like a really big impact as well. So it's a mix of stuff, but yeah, we are a small team, and
Yeah.
yeah, we do like work a lot with the other test leads and so on to try and get support on, you know, pushing these initiatives. And like when we train people, you know, they go on to then help others or answer the questions, and we have like various channels and things as well where people can ask questions. So hopefully that starts to build like a culture of quality around it, and
Mm.
you know, a culture of accessibility quality. So like it's not just one or two people who answer all the questions, it enables
Yeah.
others and empowers them to kind of answer those questions too.
Mm.
Because the more people learn about it, obviously, the better they get at it. And then we also run like workshops and things. So again, we're just trying to like slowly build up the confidence in people for accessibility, because
Nice.
that's often something that people it holds them back because they don't feel confident enough to know how to do it or how to use a screen reader or something. And like it
Yeah.
can become quite overwhelming, especially even just like running a screen reader for the first time. It's you know, it's loud. You might not know how to turn it off, and like those kinds
Mm.
of things are like
Yeah.
people just get like a little taken back. So yeah, we kind of have to leverage the people around us to support the what we're trying to do, because it's not possible for only a few people to run that and kind of lead all the efforts in accessibility. Um, but yeah, we are slowly building that up and like, you know, building more of a culture of accessibility,
Yeah.
um, particularly in the testing space.
Oh, that's great. That's great to hear. It's not easy, I know. You know, I've been in similar situations, not just with accessibility, but sort of those other areas that maybe don't get as much love or as much attention. But accessibility for me is an area that definitely doesn't get talked about as much. And it needs more focus. And I want us to talk a little bit, if it's okay,
Mhm.
Aisha, about what accessibility as a whole really is, because obviously within the software world, people may kind of have an idea, but more generally, it's in our everyday lives, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And I think that's a lot of the work we do. So like, yeah, we do like the technical training, and we do how to use this AT and so on. But the thing that really has a big impact is just like, what even is it? Like, who is it
Yeah,
for? And we do a lot of like onboarding training with new joiners where we basically do that. We also just run various sessions where we kind of say what is accessibility. So you know, it's something that can affect any of us at any point in our lives. It's
yeah,
not just something that has to, you know, it's not just a permanent thing that someone might be born with. Like it can be so dependent on the situation. Like you could be on like a really busy, loud bus and you might want to have captions on your videos. And like often you see that a lot now where
Mm.
TikTok and Instagram, all these social media sites, like they'll have captions as default because it makes it easy for everybody. And I think that's a really key part of it. Like accessibility isn't just for the few. Like if you can
Yeah.
make it accessible, it benefits everybody.
Yeah.
And obviously when as people age, there's certain things that might be more difficult for them to do. And again, that if there's barriers that people face when they're online and things like that, it's going to affect everyone at some point. So that's a really big part of it too. And then there's also like more temporary situations, like you might break your arm, for example, and you've only
Yeah.
got one hand to do something. And again, like that might not be, you know, I wasn't born with an arm permanent situation, but it's still something where you are impacted in that time that you might not be able to use that arm to do things. So that yeah, again,
Mm.
I think accessibility is such a broad um it's such a broad thing and it does impact everybody. And generally, when you make things accessible, like I said, you make it better for everybody. It's often very much cleaner code. It's simple, it's easy, and people will stay and use the services or your products that you're building because people like things to be easy and straightforward. And yeah,
Yeah.
so yeah, it definitely is something that yeah, it affects everybody.
And I, I mean, a few years ago, I broke my arm, and I was in a full arm cast,
Hmm.
full arm cast for weeks and weeks and weeks. And just doing things in general is like completely retraining my brain. Is like, oh, you don't have two hands to do this, and like obviously using a phone. Oh, having a bigger screen size is so much. No, I couldn't. My thumb wasn't big enough to reach to, Um, but also, um, when we had our daughter, especially, um, there were times when obviously you're holding her, and you're trying to do something with, maybe send a message to somebody, and just those are the sorts of things you don't really think about until you're in that situation. So being able to bring it to life for people to say, how would you feel if this was you? And you can kind of like, do you use storytelling a lot? Because storytelling is something that I'm working on more, and I really enjoy kind of bringing things to light to be relatable and just trying to get people to think differently. Is that something that you do with regards to accessibility and sort of bringing people on that journey?
Yeah, definitely. And I think the more people can relate to the subject, the more they can understand it and build like real empathy rather than like sympathy around it, because there's a big
Mm,
difference there, isn't there? And like, you know, the more you understand that this is something that can impact you or someone you care about or anything like the more people can engage with it.
yeah,
So yeah, I think that's a really big thing. And yeah, I guess like the example of like holding a baby, like I definitely have that where like I'm holding my nephew and he's a toddler, so he's like wriggling around, he's trying to punch me in
yeah,
the face as well at the same time, and like
yeah,
you really have to juggle what you're doing. So yeah, I think having those stories and kind of telling people more about how it's such a broad thing that kind of impacts everybody is really important.
yeah,
And obviously also super important is hearing people who do have those barriers and
yeah,
do experience these things every day and might use assistive technology. So it's a big area that we obviously want to focus on because we can
mm,
get lost in the technical of it. We can get lost in the way a page is coded, but what really matters is the people. So
yes,
we're
exactly,
working to kind of build more like, narratives around that and kind of showcase people's real life experiences. So like learning from them,
yeah,
understanding how they use technology. And I think when we learn more like that, we also learn there's not one way. So there's not just one way of
mm,
using a screen reader. There's not one way that a keyboard only user will use a page. Like there's differences because those things don't exist in isolation. Everything's like intersectional in that way, and people have different things that will impact the way they use technology. So
yeah,
yeah, the more we learn about that, the more we learn the differences and the nuances to it all is like it helps us better understand as well.
yeah, and it's it becomes more and more complex. But then obviously how we then tackle that has to change rather than,
Yeah.
because what you don't want is, and we often find this in our world, is everything's about speed. How quickly can we get stuff out the door? and things start becoming a little bit of a tick box exercise. But you talking there about how we learn more about accessibility, and then obviously the complexities. You can't rush through it. You've got to really think about it. And you mentioned earlier there about sort of working with not just sort of the developers, but working with your design teams and the people that are further left in the process. And can you talk a bit more about how you've kind of approached that to try and drive that way of thinking and engaging earlier, and kind of getting a seat at the table, I guess, more so than anything.
Yeah, yeah, it's really important. I think often the things that happen earlier, like they're the things that are preventable. And as soon as it goes through to like development and testing, like you've already like it's like 5 times more expensive now to fix, and the time and everything around it to address issues that could have been addressed earlier. So it's a really, really key focus for us as well. Because like I said, even though we're in the testing space, testing doesn't have to begin, in that sort of agile way that, as you mentioned yesterday, like it doesn't have to be that phase. And that's really something we try and push, that like everyone can do it. Like, and the way we set up like our easy checks, which is like a checklist we basically pull together on some common and like kind of easy things for people to review, that we train them through as well. We basically put the message across that anyone can do that. So that's why we try to engage early with like the project managers and BAs and so on. And often we see like sometimes it's the BAs working through that checklist. It doesn't have to be a QA, it doesn't have to be a dev. And they can look at that before it even gets, created. It's still in the design stage. So yeah, we often try to, where we can and where the project is like brand new, we'll work directly with them in terms of planning out like where accessibility it matters, and it needs to be factored in when they're kind of building the designs and then eventually building the code around it. So we offer a lot of support in those early stages. We've got a lot of resources that we built where we kind of lay out like different expectations in those areas and like resources for people to go away and use. But I think a key thing is just kind of the awareness piece at that point, because the more it's in a person's head that it's important, they know where we are as well. They can come to us and say, hey, well, we're actually thinking like this at this stage now. Would you mind reviewing our designs for us? And like we're present, and that really helps with that mentality. And even where, like I said, in another example where it's already live, or it's quite close to live, the more again that we're there and we're present, they'll say, oh, actually we've made these changes. Can you help us have a look? Or we did this testing around it. Does it look okay? And like that kind of thing helps build the relationship with people too. But yeah, I know our team really, really enjoy doing like the design reviews, because you find so much at that point, and like it's amazing how like receptive teams are, and they really, really like understand, and like they're really like grateful as well to kind of have noticed those things earlier on, which will save them a lot of time. And it's often things like contrast issues can really, they can be seen from a design. It's link text, so like if it's clear enough, or if it needs to be revised, error messages, if you've got the copy for the text, again, we can look at those, make sure it's clear enough, and it's giving a user the prompt that they need to actually fix the error. All those things can be looked at so much earlier. And we've also built other resources, so an accessibility acceptance criteria library. So when teams are building like Jira tickets and wherever they're building their tickets for their acceptance criteria, they can basically lift and shift what we've built, and they're all like different things against different accessibility requirements, and then tailor it to what they need to do. So we find that that's really helped teams as well, because now they better understand it's in like a given when then format, so they can pull it in, they can know exactly what the expectation is. And then when it comes to like their refinement sessions and so on, they're looking at it and they're thinking, oh, so when we build this, have we thought about if this image has got alt text, or have we thought about how a keyboard user is going to go through, and then it's captured. And I think having that visibility means it's hard to be ignored as well. It's part of the conversation. Like accessibility has that seat at the table because it's been there from the start, and it's been in the conversations from the start. So yeah, it's not always the same across every team, and obviously different teams need different support, but like it can be really, really impactful when teams do build that in from the start. And we notice when it comes to us, so we can help, like we basically encourage teams to do all that early testing, regular easy checks testing, and then but by the time they get to us, we're basically just a safety net to catch anything. So
Mm,
we do like the fuller kind of audit, which should only be the safety net. And by that point, when we've worked with them throughout and they've engaged with us, there's very, very few issues that we find at that point. Um,
yeah.
and it's very significant, the difference when we get that versus when a team is just engaged with us at that point at audit. Um, so yeah,
Yeah.
and it just becomes part of everything they do. So yeah, it's really good to see.
And I just, I mean, that's the ideal way, isn't it? For it's more to be a pull mechanism, or can you come and look at what we've done
Hmm.
versus, you having to push it on them to say, can I come and have a look at what you've done, please? Kind of thing. So they're
Yeah,
proactively, making those decisions, and because they know you're there, they know how important it is, they know what they can then do to contribute to the bigger picture. Um, and then, like you say, you get to that sort of more formal um, audit type part of the process. It almost just becomes like yeah, we're pretty confident here already, right? This should just be a little bit of an exercise we go through just to clarify that we are where we think we are versus, oh,
yeah,
could you tell us where we are, please?
yeah. It really is still a mix. Like we love it when teams are at that point where they just like want us to verify, or they already feel pretty confident, and it's just yeah, we're a last check in that way. But
Mm,
um, we do often still do a lot of the push because
of course, yeah,
it's hard as well. Like I do understand
yeah,
from like the team's perspective, they've got loads of different priorities. They're getting pushes from different angles.
yeah,
It's really, really hard when it's something that someone is basically saying to you, you need to do this bit, you need to do this extra work. They might see it as extra work, but the more you kind of have the conversations with them about how it's not and how
mm,
it eventually helps everybody, the more they begin to understand. But I also understand from their side, and I think it's meeting people where they are as well. You can't just go in and push everything on them and say you must do this, that, the other. Like you have to understand where they're at and try and
yeah,
help them where they're at because it just doesn't work otherwise. You have the conversation where you might get, some people nodding heads and then nothing happens because it's just too much for them and you haven't really
yeah,
understood like what they actually need at the time. So
yeah,
yeah, it's definitely something I've learned more as I've been in this position because I think it's a lot when you're in accessibility and like you feel like you have to do everything and it always
mm,
feels like it had to be done yesterday. So there's a lot of pressure to get things done right. You can't fail when, especially when you're working in Gov, like it needs to be right for people to access these things. So it
yes,
can be really difficult and I definitely have put a lot of pressure on myself and I know a lot of people in the industry get a lot of burnout from it. So yeah, it's
mm,
something you have to kind of manage. But the more you kind of understand that these things are not always going to happen overnight, it's fine to be incremental and it takes time sometimes for people
yeah,
to kind of realize the benefits around it. Um, but that doesn't mean it's not going to happen. So
no.
yeah.
Does it sometimes feel like you're a bit of a lone wolf almost, like in the process sometimes, because sometimes in our roles generally from a quality perspective we can be the lone, or feel like we're the lone voice just beating that drum constantly, constantly, constantly. Do you feel like that sometimes, or have you felt like that in the past? Maybe not so much now from what you're saying, but have you felt like that in the past around this?
Yeah, I think I guess now it's like different. I have a team and like a lot of support,
Yeah.
but I definitely have felt that way in the past. Um, where I do feel like I'm sort of banging that drum and it's yeah, well, we need to do this first, or we'll treat accessibility separate and we'll sign off the tickets and then we'll look at accessibility kind of thing.
Mm,
Sometimes that happens and yeah, it can be difficult and I think I have struggled with that in the past and it can feel like you're the only one going through those issues sometimes, but the more I've like learned about the community and like the accessibility community and also like the testing community and like there's so many parallels with quality engineering and like a lot of like the struggles and things that
yeah.
quality engineering has been through, the accessibility, at least myself, I feel like I can learn from and like take those learnings on board.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I definitely have experienced it, but I also have worked with really great and receptive teams as well. Like
Yeah.
when I worked at the app um company, they were a great team and we managed to, it was something that everyone actually really cared about and we had tests running on every single ticket. Everyone really understood it. I was like there for the go-to questions and things, but like people just got on with it and they like grew and really, really took it on board. And then we also like embedded like accessibility regression testing, which is something that's, I feel like I don't really see that at all really anywhere. Like it's not something that's done. So like they really did care about it, and I think that really had an impact. So I didn't feel like I was alone in that way. But I guess initially when you start somewhere, it can feel like you have to sell it. You have to, and I think this is probably something that's come up quite a lot, especially in the testing space, like being that generalist and as a QA or like accessibility lead like myself, like you have to learn how to sell the story. You have to market what you're doing. You have to get people on board. You have to do all of that work. And none of that involves like, running an automation script or something where, that might be like a,
exactly.
that's like a prized skill set. But if you can't do all the other stuff around it and socializing it and working and understanding people, like you will struggle. And it's something that, you have to practice to get, better at. And it's something I'm still learning from. There's so many things I want to do better. And I think it's important to acknowledge that when you're learning and you're growing in your role. But yeah, it's so important getting people on board with it. Yeah,
and I think we fall prey to this quite a lot in general, but I've seen it a lot happen from an accessibility perspective when the light bulb moment kind of hits. Like, we need to be better at doing this. We just need to do this versus we need to be better at doing it. And the first thing is, what can we automate? How do we automate it? And you're like, well, hold on a minute. Like, you think about all the things that we've already discussed so far in this episode around, the empathy and understanding and the complexity, and you can't automate that. It's human-centric behavior and how people interact. So often people delve in and start looking at what can be automated, what tool can I use, what's this, that, and the other, before really getting a real handle and understanding on, well, what is accessibility and why is it important in the first place, which is obviously what you've talked about earlier. So in terms of like the accessibility testing, sort of putting that into practice, obviously tooling plays a part in that. But can you talk a bit more about sort of the different types of testing that you can do from an accessibility perspective that maybe can open up people's minds a little bit more, so they're not just always just focusing on the automated side of things? That's the part I know we can do some, but there's a bigger, broader spectrum of what we can do, isn't there?
Yeah, for sure. And I think automated testing definitely has its place, and it's a really great way of having that early visibility, because it's like you said, it's the first thing people might adopt because it's something that they can run and it's low effort once it's set up, that kind of thing. And I think that's a really great way of doing it. So like the tools I've come across before, like Pally, which is like PA11Y. It's kind of taken from the word ALI, which is accessibility shortened. So there's A, and then 11 is the number of letters in between, then Y, just for people that might not know. But so Pally is one tool, and then AxeCore is another tool that is used. So they're really great because, it gets people engaged earlier. They can see the issues. It generates the report for them, and, it's there. And it's good because you can kind of see that early visibility. And like I said, that's a really, really important thing, the visibility of it. But often those tools are still only catching like 40%. And, you still have to check that they're real issues as well. And, so I do support obviously having them there, but moving away from the over reliance on just having that, like we have automated tests. So, we're covering accessibility, not quite, because it's not really, you're not really even touch on the experiences that a user's going to experience yet. And I think that's why we then split it out. So we have the automated testing, we have the manual testing, which can be just like checking page titles and things like that. So when people land on the page, they know where they're going to be. There's also like semi-automated tools you can use, which often generate similar like results to like the automated tools. So things like Wave, which are like your browser extensions. You can just download them to most browsers, and you can scan the page you're on, and it'll give you a really good like report on some issues that you might find. So some things around contrast, some coding things, some structural things, and
Yeah,
there's some really helpful tabs on that tool as well, where you can see the tabbing order listed and it'll number everything on the page for you, which I think is a really helpful tool when
that's
you're
cool. Yeah.
testing and capturing evidence as well. Yeah. And you can also see the structure, you can see where there's headings, and then also where there might be missing headings. And then headings is a really,
Mm.
really important thing on a page, because people often navigate through headings if they use a screen reader. And if you've not marked up headings, or you just styled them like headings, but they're not actually heading, they don't actually have the heading tag, people are going to be lost. So,
Yes, yeah.
yeah. So there's like the semi-automated tools. There's loads of different ones. And then there's the assistive technology testing. So that's a really important part of it too, where we'll run through with screen readers, so like assessing for the compatibility with those tools, voice control tools, keyboard accessibility. There's also like switch devices and things you can use to kind of better understand how people will actually use the product you're building.
Mm.
And then there's also actual user testing, which is obviously a really core part of all of this. So, testing with real users, understanding how they go through the page. And again, like touching on what we said earlier, like the nuances of like keyboard users, not going to be a single keyboard user experience. It's going to differ. So, yeah, I guess there's like the automated, the sort of manual, the assistive technology, and the user testing. And all these are like really, really core to accessibility testing. And yeah, so that's kind of how we try to split that out.
Yeah. And how do you obviously what are the sort of the most common types of issues that you encounter, or is there a common type? Is it is it more across the board? You'll see different things at different times.
Yeah. So there definitely are like common issues. I just have to jog my memory. So I think there's often issues around like labels for input fields and things like that. So something might not be marked up correctly. So
Yeah.
if a screen reader user is going through the page, or like a voice control user wants to interact with the field, if it's not been coded the way it looks visually, then they're not going to be able to interact with it.
Of
So
course,
like if
yeah.
they want to click a link and the link says click for information on ducks, I don't know, something like that. But when they say click information on ducks and it doesn't work, it might be that the actual label says something like see more. I don't know. It could be anything. If it's not matched up properly and coded
Yes.
correctly, they're not going to be able to go through the page. And it's very, very cumbersome watching how voice control users go through the page when things aren't coded properly, because they have to say things over and over again to kind of figure out if it's there, if it's the service they're working on, they're trying to use, sorry, or the tool that they're actually using themselves, if that's been a bit temperamental. And then once
Yes.
they've kind of exhausted those options, then they have to do like longer workarounds. So like you can pull something up called a mouse grid, and it'll basically box all of the different parts of the screen into different sections, and you have to basically narrow it down into the thing you want to press. But just imagine how
Wow.
much longer that is now to go
Yeah.
through, and you just want to click that one link.
Oh,
So
it's crazy, isn't it?
yeah, it's really, yeah, it's really tough. And I think, yeah, you start to notice more when things aren't working correctly. So yeah, I guess like having the correct labels, making sure things match visually. Like page titles tends to be something that we see quite often, where they're not kind of matching what the heading level one usually is on the page. The main purpose of the content, it should really match that, just so people know exactly where they are. And often like making sure that content's like front loaded as well. So like whatever the most unique part of the page is, that's right at the start of the page title, and then you go after that. So like the more like general information after that, that usually is quite helpful for people to see. Keyboard honestly is one of the easiest things you can use to just look through a page. Don't not
Yeah.
using your mouse, and just tab through to see, can you see where you are when you're tabbing, and is it going in the right order? Because that's
Yes.
something where we often see issues, and again, anyone can do that on their device. So you can also, when you use a keyboard, you can see if the skipped content links are working correctly. So those are usually at the top of the page, and if you want to go through as a keyboard user or a screen reader user, or you can tab through that and skip all the navigational elements that might be repeated across pages. so you can get straight to the main content, and it helps people so they don't have to tab through everything, which you might not think about if you use a mouse. You can just go straight to where you want to go.
Mm.
And then I guess contrast issues come up as well sometimes, where I guess less on Gov, because it's usually part of the design system, which is usually very accessible.
Yeah.
Still needs to be tested, obviously, and make sure it's working correctly. But often, the colors using the right combinations are accessible. But sometimes you see it where they might be using like an older color combination, and it might not be accessible in the same way. So those are a few I can think off the top of my head. There's probably many, many others that come up, and like my team who do the audits more probably know a bit more. But like from what I've seen in my time, I think those are some of the key ones that do come up.
Yeah. The contrast piece. I can't remember I don't know if somebody told me this or whether I read it somewhere around color blindness.
Mm-hmm.
And there's X amount of millions of people that suffer with color blindness in the UK, and the higher proportion of that are males.
Yeah, they are. Yeah,
and that kind of just like that not shocked me, but surprised me in the sense of the statistic being so like male dominant in that sense. And we were running a workshop recently where we got post-its, because I love a good post-it note. And we've got different coloured post-its, but we decided rather than going for the really bright coloured post-its, we went for these sort of more pale, contrasting post-its. And we had somebody in the room that couldn't differentiate between the post-its, and the workshop we were doing was using the different coloured post-its for different reasons, and we hadn't even considered it, like that variance of, can people actually pick up on these colours and the contrast of these things together and stuff like that. And so it's not just about on the screen, it's also like in those situations, isn't it, as well?
Yeah, 100%. Like I often, when I'm, out in the wild, looking at posters and things, I'm like, the worst one is when you see like yellow text on like a white background, and it's supposed to be like a marketing post. I'm like, no, like who's going to be able to see that properly? Like, and you've obviously not thought about like all your users when you've done this. And yeah, it is one of those things that you probably see more often. In your day to day as well. Because there's a lot of issues around. It is fascinating that it does affect more men. I'm not entirely sure why, but I have heard that too, and it's interesting.
Yeah, but then I'm like, well, am I seeing things how they're supposed to be? I don't know. I don't know. My dad has color blindness. Actually, he's red green deficient, and we used to play a lot of snooker growing up, and he could never tell the difference between the red and brown balls on the green cloth. It was great playing with him, because he'd say, "Stu, what's that color?" I was like, "Yeah, that's red, Dad. Don't worry." He'd hit it, and I'd be like, you just fouled. So yeah, it's a great way to beat him. So yeah, but yeah, it's really interesting, like the different types of testing you were talking about there, and like tabbing on a keyboard is such an easy thing to use to sort of test out how, making sure that the page is set up correctly and coded correctly and things like that. It's how do you, in terms of when you find issues, how do you go about prioritizing them? What's the sort of approach you take to prioritizing those issues in terms of criticality and obviously customer impact?
Yeah, so it's another like sort of guidance resource we've built as well, which is like priority matrix. So teams can kind of use that to prioritize the issues that they find. And when we do our reports as well, or any reviews we do, we often like put in like a suggestion for the priority. We know that obviously needs to be triaged by the team, and any other priorities that they have, they can, it needs to feed into that. But I guess we focus more on the impact side of things rather than like the other wider priorities. So the user impact. So we kind of, we have like 4 levels. So we have like the critical blocker sort of issues where it's completely stopping someone from completing the form, or, progressing to the next page, or seeing a certain bit of information that might be quite vital. So those things, are really, really important.
Yeah.
Don't often see them, to be honest, but when we do, like yeah, we tell the teams that it's very important. Um, the highs are the next level is high, and we kind of it's not a complete blocker, but it's also very difficult for someone to use something. They might have a workaround that's more cumbersome, but they can
Yeah.
still use it somehow. It's just not a good experience, and it will still fail like with CAD criteria and things like that.
Yeah.
So that's usually the highs. Um, Mediums is where it's still something that's quite difficult for someone to do, but it won't block them from completing anything. Any workaround is less cumbersome.
Yeah.
It's just more frustrating if if it still exists. And then we've got like the low priority. So it might be something where things are sort of repeated on the page where it shouldn't really be there, but they're still able
Mm.
to go through the application. It's still going to be they can still complete everything they need to do to get through it. So those are the four levels we have, and we've got like examples associated with them as well. And we usually just work with the teams to kind of communicate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of how we yeah, the levels we have.
And do you find that working with the teams the way you're working with them, and obviously you mentioned there's some are at different levels of maturity and stuff like that, and obviously there's pressure always to deliver in every organization,
Mm-hmm.
right? How do you ever find that there's struggles to get the accessibility issues prioritized versus, say, the functional issues versus hitting the deadlines? Or is that something you have to work on, or you're part of those conversations when they're trying to decide what they prioritize?
Yeah, it's definitely something that comes up a lot. And I think, yeah, like you said, it can, when especially where there's a lot of delivery focus or there's a lot of
Yeah.
pressure or, imminent releases and so on, accessibility can often be the one that goes first, or, we'll do it after it's live and so on. And it can be really frustrating, especially where I know the team cares as well and they want to
Yes.
make those changes, but they also have to, you know, yeah, they have to make decisions that are, wider than just the conversations on accessibility.
Yeah.
But I guess where we can, and we often try to do this with teams where we'll work with them on those refinement sessions or like defect triaging and things like that, and just keep pushing that that priority. That's all we can do, and like we can't force teams to do certain things, and we wouldn't want to be in a position where we do that anyway and be like police in that way.
No.
But the more and more we speak about it with them, the more it becomes something that's on their mind, and is the conversations start happening when we're not in the room, because like I said, we are that small team. We can't always be in
Yes.
every conversation about every release and every sort of defect triaging session and things like that. So yeah, the more we
Yeah.
try and speak about it with teams, the more we we hope that priority is pushed. But it is really hard, and
Yeah.
I know that it's not always the priority, even when we really want it to be, the teams really want it to be.
Yeah.
So yeah, it can be difficult.
Yeah, and that's generally where that compromise has to come in, and having people in the room that, like you say, that understand, they care, and they can make those balanced decisions. And obviously, the way in which you're talking about there, that whole collaborative approach,
Mm-hmm.
obviously helps with that. And then you just got to put trust in people to make the decisions based on the right reasons. Because, like you say, you can't be in every single conversation. You've only got a small team, and so on. So, in terms of like the work you mentioned there, in when we were talking earlier about obviously your role as a whole, you mentioned a lot of what you're doing is around educating and upskilling the teams. How do you go about doing that? So, for example, have you got a lot of teams that you're trying to upskill? And if so, how do you do that when all teams are at maybe different levels of knowledge and experience and maturity? And I mean, I'm asking because I feel this right now, because a lot of what
Yeah,
I'm doing is around training, and it's hard. So I'm really
it's really
interested to
hard.
know
Yeah.
from your perspective, given this particular topic and the importance of it, in how you're kind of approaching that, what your sort of different methods might be.
Yeah, and like it is a really difficult thing to do when people are at different levels, and I think a big part of our approach is just giving people different methods to learn and engage, because not everyone learns the same way. People might prefer reading, people might prefer listening, people might prefer watching or doing, and like you're never going to be able to make it right for absolutely everyone. But if you give more people different ways to learn, then that will help. So yeah, we have like a few different things we do. So like I kind of touched on it a little, but we have a lot of like guidance that we've basically built. So it was part of our testing center of excellence. We've got a SharePoint site, and we basically built out. It's like a full-on site. It's great, and it basically has all the different resources and guidelines and things, so people can just go in and read it if they want to, just like have something that they want to learn about. We also have all our any previous training sessions we might have done uploaded on there too. So yeah, we do actual training. So like this could be like a online or in person as well. So we do like virtual like presentations and things, and then sometimes it might be more workshopy. So if it's online, we'll put people in breakout rooms, we'll kind of get them in groups, and then either they can like present back together or kind of discuss with each other. So it helps them kind of make those connections with other people, but also just practice a little bit on their own service or their own product that they're working on. We also do a lot of sessions with like different departments as well, so like show and tells and things to kind of socialize what work we've got and how they can use things. And more and more people are aware of it then. So like we work a lot with like design and so on like that, just to kind of share resources there. And then the in-person ones are honestly one of my favorite ones. I really love doing that with people, like kind of sitting down with them and like showing them how a tool works, and like kind of seeing like the light bulb moments of like, wow, is that really how it is? Like those things can really make a big difference. And like I know it's hard to do because people are working all over and a lot of people work remotely, so it is trickier and it's not as common when we can do that, but when we can, I think it has a massive impact. And people can actually try it. But I think that's a big thing I've learned. Like there's so much you can just talk about in accessibility, but people need to actually learn and try. So like I try and keep the presentation stuff to a minimum. Like there are some important things that maybe I need to just talk through, but often I try to do less of the talking and just let people kind of go away and try. And then when they've got questions, they can kind of come back and tell us what they've learned or share any difficulties they're having and things like that. So we do a lot of that, which is kind of through the Testing Centre of Excellence, where it's sort of formalised, it's organised, we have like a schedule and things for it. And we'll kind of coordinate that with the streams as well, like performance and so on. But then we also work directly with the teams, because there's at least 40 different teams that we're working with, and they all have different ways of working. There's a lot of suppliers working together in government. So like it's not always going to be one size fits all, of course, for training.
No,
so
exactly.
We kind of have those training sessions where people can attend, and it's like more general, but also allows them to practice. But then we also do like more tailored sessions directly with the team. So we'll run like workshops with them. We'll understand like how they're working currently, and then introduce them to some of like the easy checks I mentioned a bit and how they could do it. And then if it's something that's feasible, how often they can see doing that. So like, we don't want to go in and say, we need to do these easy checks. It needs to be every 2 weeks and you must do it, because it just doesn't work for every team. Sometimes they're only QA. Sometimes there's a big like upskilling. There's they need to learn a lot more about it before they start doing it, and they might not be as confident in it. So we have to adapt to what the teams need. And I think when we have those like more tailored sort of sessions with teams, they really enjoy them, and like they can understand and see it in their work a bit more. So those can be sort of ad hoc, or if we've done like a review with them, it could be like conversations that are sparked from that. So we kind of identify gaps that they might have, and we try to frame it in like, you're not that you're doing bad or anything like that, because we don't want to make people feel like that, but just to kind of, this is where we can help you. These are small things you can introduce. And like, again, it's that sort of incremental change that we're trying to push. So we do have like a blend of different things. So like, we did like a workshop with them, then we might say, okay, here's more reading material, we'll refer them back to the SharePoint site. and they can go away and learn about it more. We have like videos on there and external like links and stuff to other really great resources. So yeah, we try to just give people a mix of different ways to interact. And then obviously if they just have
Yeah.
questions they want to ask us, we're always there for people to just ask on the fly, ad hoc, like on the fly questions about anything, where we can. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's what we try
I
and do.
yeah, I know firsthand how difficult it can be to make training accessible for everybody. Do you
Yeah.
know what I mean? And when the training that you're giving is about accessibility, you're even more in the spotlight because obviously you're trying to sort of educate people around around that topic as well. So yeah, I like the variants that you talked about there, and I've always tried to do the same sort of thing. I'm trying to understand better about how people learn best and try and support. And it's hard. It is hard to try and have create those environments where everybody can learn in their best way, and
Yeah.
and at their own pace as well. Um,
Yeah,
so yeah,
exactly.
so
That's a really key part of it, isn't it? Like that at their own pace.
yeah, exactly. And having all the supporting documentation to say, you can go away and have a look at this and so on. So it's great that you're able to, you're able to have that sort of approach. How do you then sort of measure the success of all the things that you're then sort of training people on? And because the training is a great part, right? We can talk about it, we can train people, but then how do you know it's had an impact? What are the things that you look for and measure, um, sort of around that, whether it be a maturity thing, whether it be sort of just more business and company success and KPIs? Is there anything that you're able to measure?
Yeah, it honestly is something I'm still trying to figure out because it's a super hard
Mm,
thing to measure, I
it
think,
is, yeah,
the
yeah,
training, because like we don't always hear the impact after, or the conversations that are happening after, because we're not involved with every team. So
yeah,
they might be having a massive impact, but we just don't hear about it. One way we've tried to measure parts of it is like putting out like different surveys. So we kind of we've been trying to kind of send out a survey like maybe before quite a few of the training sessions we've done, and then maybe like 6 months later sending out again and seeing like what improvements have been made, if people have better understanding.
mm,
We also try and send out feedback forms like immediately after any training session as well, just to kind of capture if people have learned anything new in that time.
mhm.
But in terms of like more long-term measures, like it is difficult, and yeah, it can be hard to kind of understand the real changes that teams are having. I guess I don't want to just focus on compliance, because it's easy to get
No,
into that trap of, if teams are being trained better, then all of the things around compliance should be improving, when it's not necessarily about that.
no,
We
exactly.
do have like dashboards and things where we track all of that, but I don't want to fall into the trap of that being accessible, because being compliant does not mean it's accessible.
No,
Definitely not. So, it can get you, some of the way there, but it's not everything. So yeah, I think it's something that we definitely want to build on a lot more in our team. So
yeah,
we can kind of capture more data around it. But I'll be honest, it is a difficult thing for us to do at the moment. And,
yeah,
it's something I want to learn about more, like as a lead as well, just to kind of track more of that um, kind of thing. So yeah,
yeah. No, I think it's doing those measurements generally can be difficult. We see it often with different parts of sort of the testing that we do, across tech. How do we actually measure the success of this? How do we measure the training that we're doing? How do we know it's having the right type of impact? And like you say,
hmm
just focusing on sort of those, I guess, tangible outputs of compliance. That okay, they give you an indicator of something, but it's not the true
yeah.
reflection of everything, right?
We do actually. So we do have like, we've used maturity models before to kind of assess
Yeah,
like a wider um sort of understanding of like our progress. It doesn't just
yeah,
focus on training, but like we have run those a few times, and I think it's been really helpful for us to kind of decide what to focus on.
mm,
Um, we also speak a lot with like the other test leads and kind of help um when we talk with them, so they can help us identify like areas that teams need more focus, or
yeah,
and when things get a bit quieter in that regard, like it can mean that they're doing better with it, but it also could mean they're not bringing it up or they don't have time for it. So yeah,
yeah,
again, it could be tricky, but another thing we also try and do is like write case studies, where we
Mm,
kind of interview the teams a little, and like they can kind of tell us how their experience has been and like what they've learned along the way. Um, so yeah,
I
that
like
it's like
that.
service. Yeah, it's like
Yeah,
service specific, but like I think that really is good because it's something again we can share on like our site and others can see it and kind of see that really really like deep impact on like
yeah,
how that service has understood and improved things.
mm,
So I think that's a nice way of doing it, but like having like one uniform like quantitative way of measuring it, I don't think I'm quite there with that, but like there's lots of qualitative ways you can measure it and like kind of the conversations people are having and
yeah,
the better improved understanding that people start to have, like you start to see it crop up more in conversations. Um, and I guess another
yeah,
thing is another indication is more and more people asking me questions after we've done training and things. I think that's usually a good indication,
yeah,
even if it's like a few months down the line, like I know it's something they've actually looked at then.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, those are a few of the ways that I like try and measure it, but yeah, it is something that's difficult, I'd still say.
Yeah, and sometimes it is just changing behavior, like, and it's a feeling you get as well. It's like things feel different. We're having more
Yeah.
conversations, and whilst you can't put a number on it, which often people are like, well, has it gone from this number to this number? It's not something you can measure in that way.
Yeah.
I think the thing for me is always around: are we trending in the right direction? Are things
Yeah.
improving incrementally, and how do we just stay on versus all of a sudden things, they look like they're improving, then all of a sudden things maybe take a step back, which often happens, right? We might take two steps forward, one step back, and it's trying to keep that momentum going and keeping people constantly maturing and building that level of maturity can be quite difficult.
Yeah. And I think it's like
um
checking in with them like every few months or so just to kind of understand like, did that thing we did a few months ago help? How have you been getting on with it? Like trying to make sure we schedule time to measure it in
yeah,
that way as well, like is really important because it can be easy just to kind of put it to the back of your mind if it's other things are going on in your team. So I know that's something else we're trying to like make more formal, but again, it's finding the time to do that with everything else we're trying to do, which is really
time
hard.
time is the
Yeah.
enemy of progress. So I always say. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Speaking of time, we're coming towards the end of this now.
Oh, wow.
I know exactly. This has been amazing, right? And there's a couple of bits I just want us to finish off on. One of them was we had a question from Ollie Fairhall, who posted on to the MOT Slack channel. I'd just like to talk around a little bit, if that's okay.
Hmm.
Um, Ollie said, I've just been having a conversation around how we go about automating some accessibility checks. If you've got any advice on this for a team just starting out with it, that would be great. One question we've discussed is when to run them. Do we run them with the other tests we run in, say, Cypress or some other way? The initial thinking is to run at the same time, if only to treat accessibility as a first-class citizen. Now, obviously, earlier we talked about automation being one way. So hopefully, Ollie, if you're listening, we've kind of expanded that thinking around what else can we do. But in terms of Ollie's question here, Aisha, what are your thoughts in terms of when they should be run?
Yeah, so yeah, I guess like you mentioned earlier, there's a few different tools you can use. So if you're like new to it, like Paddy and Axclaw are good tools to use, and also be happy to chat, separately about any of that if anyone wants to, discuss them. And then I guess in terms of when you run them, so again, I guess it's something that we talk about a lot at the Test and Centre of Excellence, and it's not something we try and like dictate to teams. I think it
Mm,
will depend on like their processes as well. So we do try and keep that in mind. But I do like the thinking, which is, whatever works to make sure accessibility is part and parcel of everything you're doing would
yeah,
be a good approach. So if it's something that you think would be make sense to run alongside your other tests, so it's not forgotten about or treated separately, absolutely, yes, do that. Sometimes teams will kind of have the test running as part of the same pipelines as other tests. So it's all captured in one, but it means that if any accessibility failures are there, then it will fail the whole pipeline, which can be difficult to manage as well. So
yeah,
yeah, it really does depend on the team. Sometimes they'll separate them out as separate tests so they can easily track like any changes, any failures, and address them like accordingly. And sometimes teams will run them at the same time. Like I think it's the same thing with like manual testing as well. Like some teams will have Jira tickets where they capture everything that they need to test on that ticket, including accessibility. And sometimes they want to split it out to make sure it has the right attention it deserves, whilst also still being a priority. So yeah, I think it'll depend on like your processes, but yeah, I think anything you can do to make sure accessibility is something that's not the afterthought or thought about, you know, after all the other testing is done, is a good approach to take, because then it's not something that's forgotten, or oh, we'll just switch those off for now, we can run them on the next release or so on. Like run them either at the same time or straight after and track them accordingly, so they're not forgotten about any issues.
Yeah, and the thing that really jumps out to me, Ollie, in your question there is the bit that you put in brackets about treating accessibility as a first-class citizen. So the fact that you're already starting to think about how you can do that is a really good first step, regardless, because like you've said there, you know, you want to bring it to the forefront. However you do that, it needs to be part of the bigger picture and a known part of the bigger picture.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like, you know, automated testing is still just a tool at the end of the day. And like we mentioned earlier, it will only catch 30-40%. So it doesn't really matter exactly how you do it. It's just like, you know, we were just saying like it's a conversation that's being had. And that's a really big part of it, because getting people to understand it, get buy-in on it, and, you know, start building those conversations around it is really one of the harder things to do. So yeah, it's
brilliant.
Good. Good to hear.
Yeah, so thank you for your question, Ollie. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of an insight into that, as well as everything else we've covered in the episode so far. Before closing off, I'm really keen to get your thoughts, Ayesha, on what's next in accessibility testing. You know, where do you see things going? Any trends? You know, what's your vision? You know, anything you'd like to share as a final thought?
Yeah, so I guess AI is always a big topic at the moment.
What's AI?
Everyone wants to talk
I've not heard of AI before.
So yeah, obviously any conversation in testing can't really be had without at least considering like what it could mean. So I think it's a really cool space for accessibility, because there's certain things that are really, really going to help people, and, you know, really help speed up things. I think my focus in terms of adopting AI tools is probably, I'm still a bit suspicious of anything that's going to try and replace any sort of assistive technology.
Yeah.
In all honesty, because I've really struggled with understanding how that can replace a real human going through the page. But there's certain things that can really help in terms of like processes. So like anything that can help you, you know, do your admin stuff around accessibility testing, I think is something that is something I'm definitely considering. Like anything that can help automate like statement updates. So Jake from DFE, the Department for Education, showed like a really fantastic tool where you can kind of input, it's not necessarily AI, but it automates any updates to an accessibility statement, so you don't have to go through the manual admin reviewing process. Which is a really, really fantastic process improvement, I think, because it's something that can be really, really time consuming to kind of work through and draft and publish accessibility statements. And then also like looking at ways to try and help generate more efficient ways of like building bug reports and things. So like people in our team are like currently building those. Sophie in our team is fantastic. She's sort of built a tool where she's trialing at the moment, where you can kind of input your details of an issue and then it'll basically generate like a nice report for you. So you obviously still need to review it, make sure it makes sense and everything, but it's another way again of helping like speed up our processes for auditing and things like that. And yeah, those are good ways that I would look to improve and like help make things more efficient. And yeah, I guess, and it's not necessarily like a trend, but I guess my outlook for accessibility is kind of taking a step back from my earlier self, where I was kind of putting my pressure on myself to do absolutely everything all the time. And I think especially with the European Accessibility Act now in force, it's something that is going to be on the forefront of a lot of people's minds. It's going to be a lot of people sort of maybe panicking around that. And I just think it's something that it is difficult. It's a difficult thing to navigate, I guess. But yeah, my whole message with accessibility is that it's not something that has to happen overnight. It can be
Yeah.
something that's, you do slowly, you learn about slowly, you lean on the community to ask questions, attend the talks, the conferences, go to the meetups and speak to people and learn about it. And, it's a really good space to be in. And the more you do in it, the more you can learn from it. So yeah, I just think I know personally I've kind of taken a step back from trying to overwhelm myself with everything and just try and focus on what I can do in that moment.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess that's just my piece of advice on it, is just to kind of not try to overwhelm yourself with everything. Start with something small, start with keyboard, start with listening to one tutorial on voiceover and kind of go from there and learn.
It's a really great piece of advice because it can become overwhelming. You mentioned that earlier, and I think that, because you can be in that situation where you may feel like you're the lone voice or anything like that, like you say, start small. But also, anybody that's listening to this or watching this, obviously the podcast, this episode is hopefully sharing more information with you and stuff like that. But look out for different talks. There's a lot of a lot of people out there that do talk about accessibility. You can learn a lot from people, and that can just help you kind of with understanding where to even start with some of the conversations, let alone the technical elements of what we're trying to achieve. So, Aisha, we are at the end of the episode. The time has just flown by, I think.
It really has.
Unbelievable. I've so enjoyed this. I think it's been absolutely amazing to have you on. So yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to join, share your experience, share your thoughts. We've covered so much. And yeah, we could keep talking. I know we could keep talking.
Yeah,
So maybe
definitely can.
we'll do a follow up to this one, definitely. But thank you so much again for joining. Is there anything that you'd like to leave the audience with, as a final statement?
I guess you don't have to have accessibility in your title to care about it and advocate for it. Like, you can go away and you can have that influence with your teams and start building that empathy with people. So just go away and learn something, and even if it's one thing, like, you can start small and build from there. Don't be afraid to like jump in and like fail sometimes with it, like fail with your learnings or anything like that. Just go and try, and like that's what I would leave people with. Like, you don't have to be perfect all the time. I know I haven't been, and it's good to be aware of that. But yeah, I guess that's what I would leave people with. And thank you so much for having me, Stu. Really enjoyed it as well. It's been so good to talk about everything.
Absolutely my pleasure. And what a great statement to leave people with at the end of the episode. So thank you. Well, that's it, everyone. So this has been an unplugged episode. We hope you enjoy it, and join us next time on Quality Talks podcast. Take care for now.
Thanks.